Welcome to Bible True Crime with Mr. Thoroughly. If you like true crime and interesting Bible stories, then this is the podcast for you. In this episode, we'll look at the Meekest Murderer. Heidi, are you ready to begin?
I'm ready. You've kept me in suspense for a long time, so I'm ready to get going.
Well, what all have I told you about this episode?
Nothing.
Great. We'll have a good time with this. This episode's going to have some different twists, and it's going to be interesting, to say the least. And when I say a twist, at the end, it might not be what it seems like that it is. So I thought that was kind of exciting, and it's something that I hadn't really looked at before. So we will get to that as we go. But we're going to begin in Exodus chapter 1. Now, we did have an episode talking about Joseph being sold by his brothers into slavery, and that was episode 2. And after that, he became a ruler in Egypt, and during a famine, his whole family moved there. And they were well treated in Egypt. And this is going to be quite a bit longer after that. 400 years or something like that after this. So this is going to take place about 1500 BC. So Exodus chapter 1. Now, these are the names of the children of Israel who came to Egypt. Each man and his household came with Jacob. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All those who were descendants of Jacob were 70 persons, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, all his brothers, and all that generation. But the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. So the part that we're seeing here with this is that there's a whole bunch of these Hebrews that are in the land of Egypt. And this is several hundred years later, like I said, about 1500 BC. That we're looking at right now.
And when was it that the story of Joseph happened?
I think that was around 1900 BC. I think that's what we said with that episode. And I'm just giving a ballpark figures. It's not like exact dates or anything like that, but it's around that time. So I don't even know if anybody could be more specific with that stuff, but either way, I'm ballparking it. But when you get to 4,000 years ago, it's a really long time any way you look at it. And this would be about 3,500 years ago. So let's keep reading here. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, "Look, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and it happen in the event of war that they also join our enemies and fight against us, and so go up out of the land." Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh supply cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were in dread of the children of Israel. So the Egyptians made the children of Israel serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in mortar, in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service in which they made them serve was with rigor. Then the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, of whom the name of one was Shirphra, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, when you do the duties of a midwife for the Hebrew women, and see them on the birthstones, if it is a son, then you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared God, and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the male children alive. So let me stop right there. So we've got a bad situation here. The Egyptians are afraid of the Hebrews, that they're going to join their enemies, and also that they'll leave because they're using them as slaves. And that's their workforce. So if they get rid of their slaves, then they're going to have to do the work, I guess. So they don't want to get rid of their slaves, but they don't want them to be so numerous and be able to rebel either. So they make them work really hard, and they put them in heavy subjection that they served with rigor. So they're in a bad spot there. And then he commands the Egyptian midwives to kill the children. But it says that they don't do it because they feared God. So kind of interesting there what that's like. So let's continue on here. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said to them, why have you done this thing and saved the male children alive? And the midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are lively and give birth before the midwives come to them. Therefore, God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very mighty. And so it was, because the midwives feared God, that he provided households for them. So Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive.
Boy, that was pretty bold of those Hebrew women to go against that king that had dealt so treacherously with all of those Egyptian, or not Egyptian, but Hebrew people.
It seems like they feared God, which is interesting. You know, it reminds me of Rahab the harlot. You know, when the spies came into Jericho, you know, and she hid them and stuff because she feared God. So
we'll have to do an episode on that another day.
Yeah, that'd be a good one to do. And if you're listening to this and you think parts of the Bible you'd like us to cover, you know, or stories in the Bible, let us know, and we'll make sure that we get them covered. There's a lot there for us to go through, so we'll try to move it up on the ladder and hit that. Now, there's something interesting here that it doesn't say anything about this in the Bible, but it's something that's just kind of a fact. And that is that in the Nile River, there are Nile crocodiles. It's a type of crocodile, and they're named Nile crocodiles. And these things get up to around 20 feet long and can weigh up to 1,500 pounds. So that's a pretty big crocodile there. And I was reading about this today, and they said that they have done studies on these crocodiles, and if they hear any kind of an animal that's in distress, that they're attracted to it, and they go after that animal to eat it, because that's easy pickings for them. They don't have to chase it as much if it's injured or something like that. And they said, in particular, the cry of young animals attracts these Nile crocodiles the most. And that includes the cry of human babies. So if they hear the cry of a human baby, they're attracted to it like a magnet, and they go after it to get a meal.
How terrible.
Yeah, What? And they say that in Egypt that the Nile crocodile kills a lot of people every year. So it's a really dangerous animal to be near or to be around, but they're right there in the Nile River. So that's something, the Bible doesn't say anything about that, but when the Pharaoh is commanding them to put their children, to cast them into the river, to kill them. It's feeding the crocodiles is what's going on here.
And all of those people would have known about the crocodiles.
Yeah. Well, and I just thought, there's not much of a chance of a child surviving if you just throw them into the river anyway. But this is a particular bad case. So let's look at chapter 2 here. And a man of the house of Levi went and took as wife a daughter of Levi. So the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, dabbed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside, and when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. So she had compassion on him, and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." So we have a mother that tries for 3 months to keep her child safe, but then she decides, she's got to put him in the river. She can't keep him secret any longer, and she's just hoping that something good is going to happen. So she makes a little, an ark. It's a little boat.
Mine calls it a wicker basket.
A wicker basket, yeah, something that's going to float, and they set him in there. But it's interesting that that where they let him loose is near where the Pharaoh is going to see the baby. So they might be hoping that there's some mercy, or maybe she had a reputation for some kind of kindness. Don't know, but that's what happens here, and she recognizes this is one of the Hebrew children.
Imagine the fear that poor mama was going through.
Yeah. That'd be crazy. It's the sister of this baby that stands afar off to see what would happen. So she's watching to see what's going to happen here. So there's a witness to all these things. So look at verse 7. It says, "Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, 'Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?' And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Go.' The maiden went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages.' So the woman took the child and nursed him. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, 'Because I drew him out of the water.'" So the sister's there to orchestrate all this, and they actually get it to where Moses stays with the mother so she can, until he's weaned. So she breastfeeds him all that time, and then when he's older, he pretty much becomes Pharaoh's daughter, like an adopted daughter there.
Or son.
Or son. Yeah, that's definitely right. Moses is the son to Pharaoh here, Pharaoh's daughter.
Right.
As long as I don't get confused, we'll be doing great here. This is just kind of an interesting situation. You see how this has all come about here. Now, I want us to turn over to Acts chapter 7 for a second to just see something there. So in Acts chapter 7, we're going to have Stephen that's going to give a summary of these events that are taking place here. But when the time of the promise drew near, which God had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt, till another king arose who did not know Joseph. This man dealt treacherously with our people and oppressed our forefathers, making them expose their babies so that they might not live. At this time Moses was born and was well-pleasing to God, and he was brought up in his father's house for 3 months. But when he was set out, Pharaoh's daughter took him away and brought him up as her own son. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and deeds. So this kind of tells the background of what happens there. So Moses is raised up in Pharaoh's household and is tutored and taught by the Egyptians, and so he knows all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he learns all those things for all that time. Let me read one more verse here. It says, "Now when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Israel." So he's 40 years old at this point. So we went from Moses being a baby in a basket till 40 years later, and he's going to visit his brethren. Interesting situation that's going to happen here, and it is what this story is mainly about. So now back in Exodus chapter 2 here. It says, "Now it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out to his brethren and looked at their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he looked this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting, and he said to the one, 'Who did the wrong? Why are you striking your companion?' Then he said, 'Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?' So Moses feared and said, 'Surely this thing is known.' When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by the well." So Moses is 40 years old at this time. He's going to flee to the land of Midian because Pharaoh's seeking to have him killed for killing this Egyptian. He's there for 40 years. And that's when he's going to come back and deliver the people, and the 10 plagues are going to happen. So he's going to be 80 years old at that point. And then they're going to wander in the wilderness for another 40 years. So you got 40, 40, and 40. But this is the event that happens when he's 40 years old. And he kills this Egyptian here.
It's interesting to think about that his biological mother must have told him about his people, even though he was raised to be like the Egyptians by Pharaoh's daughter. But she would have had his biological mother would have had a special relationship with him to be able to tell him about his blood relatives.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't necessarily mean that this is the first time that he went to go see his brethren. It's just like on one of these occasions he goes to visit his brethren, and this situation has taken place. So it's quite possible that he's visited his brethren repeatedly. I mean, we're talking 40 years here. That's a long time. And he definitely knows who his brethren are. And he considers himself to be a Hebrew and not an Egyptian. And that might have been something that the Egyptians made it. They distinguished between that. They're like, you're a Hebrew, you're a Hebrew, you're a Hebrew. So he knows that these are his brethren that are the slaves, even though he's being raised in Pharaoh's household. So yeah, that is interesting to think about that there. So the question comes up here, when we read this, it really seems like it's murder. That Moses murders an Egyptian. But as I looked into this, there's a reason why it might not be murder. And it has to do with the way that they've translated some of these things into the English here. So I'm going to go back and talk about what happens here. It says, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. That word beating there means to beat to death or to strike to death. So he sees him beating him to death. And then it says, so he looked this way and that, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. That word killed is the same word that was used for the Egyptian beating a Hebrew.
That's interesting. My version, it says struck down.
Does it say that it struck
says,
down the Hebrew?
It says beating a Hebrew and then struck down the Egyptian.
Yeah, so it's the exact same word though. So he beats this Egyptian to death, or he strikes him down until he's dead, and he hit him in the sand. So you know that he's dead. And then when you look at the next part there, where the two are fighting, and then they say, do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Now that's actually the word for kill, where he says, kill me as you killed the Egyptian. That's just flat out the word for kill. But before that, it's the word for to beat to death. And also right before that, when he sees the two Hebrew men were fighting, and he said to the one who did wrong, why are you striking your companion? It's that same word, to beat to death.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so you've got the Egyptian that's beating a Hebrew to death. Moses beats him to death. And then the next day, you have two Hebrews that are fighting, and one is striking the other to death. And Moses intervenes with that. So it's interesting that when Moses beats the Egyptian to death, right before he does it, it says that he looks to the left and he looks to the right to make sure that there's nobody else around.
Right.
So there's not any witnesses to this, but yet the next day, Moses is surprised that the thing has been made known. So who's the witness?
I don't know.
Now, here's what, and I'm going to do some serious speculation here. But it says that he finds the Egyptian beating the Hebrew to death. And then he looks around and he beats the Egyptian to death. It could be that the Egyptian was never able to finish killing that Hebrew.
Oh.
And that Hebrew is the witness. And he told other people, hey, you know that Hebrew that lives in the palace? I mean, he would have been like a celebrity. He killed an Egyptian that was beating me. And then it was known, and when it became made known, Moses hightails it out of there to save his skin, because Pharaoh's going to come after him for doing that.
It's interesting to think about that. It seems like there was no love lost there. Like the Pharaoh quickly is ready to go after Moses, not like he was raised as his grandchild.
Yeah, because he's still a Hebrew.
Right.
And all the Hebrews are, and remember, I think I said Sleebrews. But and you remember that the Hebrews are all slaves, and Pharaoh is afraid of them. He's trying to kill them. He's trying to keep them from multiplying. So he doesn't have, there's no love lost for him on the Hebrews.
Right.
So he's got to, maybe he's wanted a reason to get rid of Moses. And his daughter stood in the way, but now he killed an Egyptian, so he comes after him.
Yeah.
Now, I want to go back over to Acts chapter 7. And this is where Stephen is recounting this story. And this is 1,500 years later in the New Testament here. It says, "And seeing one of them suffer wrong, he defended and avenged him who was oppressed, and struck down the Egyptian. For he supposed that his brethren would have understood that God would deliver them by his hand. But they did not understand. And the next day he appeared to two of them as they were fighting, and tried to reconcile them, saying, Men, you are brethren. Why do you wrong one another?" So it just recounting that story there, but it says that he avenged his fellow Hebrew. So it might not be that this is murder here, but that there was one, the Egyptian, who was murdering a Hebrew, and Moses intervened and avenges him by killing this Egyptian. So I mean that's something that today, say that you're concealed carry, you have a gun with you. You can't defend like your property or something like that. Your house you can. They have, depending on the state that you're in, you can defend your house. But if you're like in a different area and you're in your car or something like that, you can't really defend your car. And like I said, there's different laws in different areas. But if there's somebody that is harming somebody else and where they're endangering somebody else's life, and you shoot them, you are not guilty of murder in that situation. So it's just kind of interesting that even in our laws today, that if somebody's killing somebody else, you kill them to save that person, then you're not going to be guilty of murder.
Right.
In that situation. So that could be what's going on here. But people debate whether Moses murdered somebody or whether it was just that he was avenging a situation, or maybe even, it's possible, this is my speculation, that he actually saved that Hebrew who became the witness that told everybody else what had happened.
Right. I guess the part that I've always thought about with that is because he looks to the left and to the right, it makes it seem like he's deliberately doing something wrong. But that's, I guess, just my preformed opinion about it.
Well, I'm sure that I'm sure there would be a heavy punishment for any Hebrew slave that did something to an Egyptian. Sure. And if they killed him, I'm guessing that's an instant death sentence, which is what we actually see if Pharaoh tries to kill him because of that. So it's something that he wasn't allowed to do by Pharaoh's law.
Right.
So he didn't want anybody to know about it. And he really thought the coast was clear. That's why, I'm kind of suspecting that this Hebrew might have survived. But if he doesn't and he gets killed, then somebody saw it happen, even though Moses didn't see them. So there's a witness one way or another. I just thought that was kind of interesting. Now, the title of this episode was The Meekest Murderer. And I'm not even sure if he's a murderer at this point after looking at all this stuff, though. But the reason why he's the meekest is that in Numbers chapter 12 and verse 3, it says, "Now the man Moses was very humble," some versions say meek there, "more than all men who were on the face of the earth." So at the time that Moses was alive, he was the most humble or the meekest person. which really means that he was gentle, which is interesting when you think about that. In this episode, he kills somebody, maybe murders somebody, but he was the gentlest person at that time. So it took a lot to get him to this place to where he avenges his fellow Hebrew.
Right. And we know that Moses could have, it could have been murder. Moses could have made that sin, that mistake, because he wasn't perfect. But at the same time, it makes you wonder if he became the most humble or the meekest because of what he'd been through.
Yeah, maybe. Because he realized, he's not perfect either.
Yeah.
And all of us have to come to that conclusion at one point or another,
Right.
We are definitely not perfect, even if we pretend to be.
Right. To put together all those pieces in the whole story about that we see with the women that saved those babies, and with and there's another part to that too, but just that there's a higher law than the law of the land, and sometimes we don't know the best course of action, but we can't ever go wrong if we're following God.
Good point there. Well, I think that's good for this episode.
Steve, do you have a parting scripture for us today?
In 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 13, the Apostle Paul tells Timothy, "Until I come, devote yourself to the public reading of Scripture, to exhortation, to teaching." All Scripture is taken from the New King James Version, New American Standard Bible, English Standard Version, New International Version, or the King James Version.
Thank you for listening today. Be sure to follow the Mr. Thoroughly podcast, share it with your friends, and join us again next time for more Bible True Crime.